Think about the feeling of opening a fresh box of sneakers. You get that crinkle of the tissue paper.
Oh, yeah. And that pristine, untouched new shoe smell.
Right, exactly. The perfectly white soles. I mean, it just feels so clean. But uh, if you were to actually follow the life cycle of that shoe, that image shatters pretty quickly.
It really does, because instead of a pristine box, you're actually looking at like oil rigs, massive chemical vats, and ultimately just a mountain of rotting rubber in a landfill.
Which is pretty heavy to think about.
Yeah.
And with Earth Day 2026 coming up so soon, it's April 22nd,
Mm.
we figured it's the perfect time to look down at our own closets. Like, what is our footwear actually costing the planet?
It's a massive blind spot for most people, to be honest.
Yeah.
We agonize over the gas mileage of our cars or whether to use a paper or plastic straw.
The straw debate, yeah.
Right. But the things we literally walk around in every single day, they fly completely under the radar.
Which is why today's deep dive is dedicated entirely to the environmental footprint of the global footwear industry. And we've pulled together a really serious stack of sources to figure out what's really going on here.
Yeah, we're looking at peer-reviewed, cradle-to-grave life cycle assessments.
Which are basically these rigorous scientific breakdowns of professional footwear, right?
Exactly. And we're also digging into massive industry data sets. Like, we have data analyzing over 8,700 different shoe models.
Wow, that's a huge data set.
It is. Plus, we have reports from global innovation hubs that are trying to track where our post-consumer waste actually ends up.
Right, so the mission for this deep dive is straightforward. We want to unpack the science of why shoes have become this ecological nightmare. And we're going to give you the ultimate data-backed shortcut to making earth-friendly choices.
So you don't fall for all the clever greenwashing campaigns out there.
Yes. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to figure out how to change our habits, we first need to look at the staggering planetary scale of the shoe industry right now.
Yeah, and the baseline numbers from 2024 are, well, they're almost hard to conceptualize. In that single year, the global industry produced 23.9 billion pairs of shoes.
Billion, with a B.
With a B, yeah.
Let me just put a visual to that for you. If you took 23.9 billion pairs of shoes and lined them up heel to toe, you could wrap that chain around the Earth's equator nearly 300 times
It's just wow.
from 1 year of manufacturing.
And, the carbon emissions tied to that volume are just immense. Footwear is responsible for roughly 1.4% of all global greenhouse gas emissions.
And the broader fashion industry as a whole is what, hovering around 8 to 10%?
About 8 to 10%. So footwear is carving out a highly concentrated, very significant slice of that pie.
Let's look at the carbon map for an individual pair, because the sources broke this down beautifully. An average pair of shoes carries a footprint of 35.58 kilograms of CO2 equivalent.
Right, but there's a huge range there depending on the shoe's design.
Yeah, the data showed a massive swing, anywhere from roughly 5.8 kilograms up to over 84 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per pair.
But sticking with that average, almost 36 kilos of carbon for an average pair. That's like the physical weight of a fully packed, heavy piece of check-in luggage.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to picture it.
Just imagine a massive suitcase made of pure greenhouse gas just floating up into the atmosphere for every single pair of shoes you buy.
Wait, I have to push back here, though. Is it just the sheer volume of shoes we're churning out that causes this? Or is there something, like, fundamentally toxic about the way a modern shoe is built?
Well, the volume definitely accelerates the crisis, but the fundamental flaw is the design itself, specifically when we consider the end of a shoe's life.
Because they just get thrown away.
Exactly. An estimated 90% to 95% of those billions of shoes are currently destined straight for a landfill or an incinerator.
95%.
Yeah. There is virtually no large-scale circular system in place to handle a sneaker when the tread wears out.
But, I mean, we managed to recycle complex things like cars, computers, major appliances. So why exactly can't we just toss an old pair of sneakers into a recycling bin? Why are they basically doomed to the dump?
To really understand that, our sources use a cradle-to-grave life cycle assessment, or LCA.
Right.
This methodology measures every single environmental impact, starting from the moment raw materials are extracted from the earth, through manufacturing, shipping, usage, and finally disposal.
Right. And there was one specific case study in our stack that really laid this out. It looked at a men's safety work boot, size 42 in the EU, weighing about 1,160 grams.
Which is a pretty standard heavy-duty boot.
Yeah. I read through that data, and the breakdown is just wild. The total carbon footprint of that boot was 18.65 kilograms of CO2 equivalent.
But the timeline of those emissions is what's really important.
Yes, that's what shocked me. a massive 80% of that total impact comes from what the researchers call component manufacture.
And that 80% figure, that's basically the smoking gun of the footwear industry. Component manufacture isn't the act of sewing the shoe together on an assembly line.
Right, is making the materials themselves.
Exactly. It's the highly energy-intensive process of creating the raw materials. So if a shoe uses synthetic materials, you have to literally drill for petroleum, refine that oil, and then use massive amounts of heat and chemical processing to whip those plastics into things like EVA foam.
EVA foam being ethylene vinyl acetate, right? The cushy stuff in the midsole.
Right. And if it's a leather shoe, you have the methane emissions from cattle ranches, followed by the heavy chemical baths required in the tanning process.
So the bulk of the damage is done before the shoe even looks like a shoe.
Yep.
And the data breaks that 80% down even further. The upper, the material wrapping around the top of your foot, that generates about 40% of the emissions.
Yeah.
And the sole accounts for roughly 30%.
And the actual assembly line, where workers are like stitching and gluing the pieces together, that only makes up about 7% of the shoe's footprint.
And rotting in a landfill at the end of its life is about 8%.
What's fascinating here is how this really exposes standard corporate marketing.
Oh, totally.
Because brands love to run these advertising campaigns, highlighting their green factories running on solar panels or their optimized low-emission shipping routes.
Right, which, those things do matter.
They do matter, but they are tinkering with a tiny fraction of the problem. The material choices are what dictate the footprint.
And the hypercomplexity of those materials is exactly why we can't recycle them. A modern running shoe can contain over 60 different components.
The 60?
Yeah, you've got polyurethane foam, synthetic rubber, woven polyester textiles, leather overlays, metal eyelets. It's honestly like trying to unbake a cake.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Once you mix the flour, the eggs, and the sugar and bake it, you can't exactly separate those ingredients back out.
And the baking in this context relies on industrial adhesives. The industry uses incredibly strong, often highly toxic glues to permanently bond those 60 different materials together.
Because they have to survive on our feet.
Right. They have to withstand body weight, shear force, rain, friction. And because those plastics and textiles are chemically and physically fused, mechanical disassembly is practically impossible at scale right now.
Meaning you can't just strip a shoe down to isolate the pure rubber, the pure foam, and the pure polyester so they can be melted down and reused.
Exactly. They are engineered to be indestructible while they're on your feet, which basically guarantees they'll be an indestructible nightmare in the soil.
Which forces a pretty massive realization. If raw materials are driving 80% of a shoe's environmental impact, the fastest way to save the planet isn't holding our breath for some magical, eco-friendly super material.
No, not at all.
It's simply making and buying fewer shoes.
The math points directly to that conclusion, and we can clearly see this when we contrast the modern fast fashion model with traditional durable footwear.
Right, fast fashion.
Yeah, fast fashion relies on extremely low-cost, petroleum-based synthetic foams and ultra-thin uppers. They are engineered purely for trends, not longevity.
Right, and I brought the numbers on this because it completely changed how I look at my own closet.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you buy a cheap, trendy pair of shoes. The foam compresses or the upper tears in, a few months?
Usually, yeah.
So if a consumer buys 4 of those cheap pairs in a single year, they are generating between 56 and 140 kilograms of CO2 equivalent annually, just to keep shoes on their feet.
And because they're a fused mess of cheap synthetics, like we talked about, all 4 of those pairs go straight to the landfill.
Straight to the trash.
Now compare that cost per wear equation to a durable, high-quality shoe. Think of a boot constructed with thick, full-grain leather or heavy-duty canvas.
The kind that uses traditional stitched or welted construction, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just slathering everything in industrial glue.
Exactly.
But wait, those definitely have a much higher upfront carbon footprint, though. Processing thick leather or dense natural rubber requires a ton of water and energy.
Oh, it absolutely does, but the environmental math flips drastically in your favor over a timeline of just a few years.
Because of repairs.
Right. When a well-built shoe wears down, it is almost always just the outsole, the very bottom tread that degrades. Because the shoe is stitched together, you can take it to a cobbler. They snip the threads, pull off the dead rubber, and stitch on a brand new sole.
And going back to our LCA data, the sole is only 30% of the shoe's mass. So by resoling, you're saving the entire upper, which we know is responsible for 40% of the manufacturing emissions.
You basically bypass the need to drill for more oil or tan more leather.
Over a 5-year timeline, the difference is just staggering. Buying 10 cheap pairs over 5 years generates roughly 200 kilograms of CO2 equivalent.
Wow.
But if you buy two highly durable pairs and simply resole them when the tread wears out, your total footprint drops to somewhere between 50 and 70 kilograms of CO2 equivalent.
That is up to a 75% reduction in life cycle emissions.
It's huge. It's exactly like the logic of buying disposable alkaline batteries versus rechargeable ones. The rechargeable ones, they sting a little bit more at the cash register, but the environmental cost per wear is practically pennies compared to tossing 100 dead batteries in the trash.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire fast fashion footwear model relies on a cycle of rapid overconsumption.
Of course.
Their profit margins demand that you throw the shoe away and buy the new colorway every single season. So the most radical environmental act a consumer can take is simply defying that model and keeping their shoes in active use longer.
Okay, I love the idea of consumer empowerment, I really do. But we can't put the entire weight of 23.9 billion pairs of shoes on the shoulders of the individual shopper.
No, definitely not.
The industry is structurally broken.
Yeah.
So what are the engineers and the global innovation hubs actually doing to redesign the shoe from the ground up?
Well, the industry is fully aware that their current trajectory is a dead end. Our sources highlight a massive push towards circularity. The concept where old products become the raw materials for new ones.
Right.
And researchers have mapped out 6 critical intervention points to make this happen: design, materials, sorting waste, disassembly, recycling, and traceability.
Okay, let's actually walk through what those look like in reality, because throwing words like traceability around can feel a bit abstract.
Sure, so take sorting waste and traceability. Right now, post-consumer waste is a black box. You throw a shoe away and it just disappears.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. But European initiatives are currently mapping global waste streams using advanced sorting facilities to figure out exactly what volumes of specific plastics are piling up.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then disassembly and design tackle the glue problem. Innovators are trying to create reversible adhesives that hold strong during a marathon, but dissolve when exposed to a specific frequency of heat or chemical wash in a recycling plant.
Oh, that's clever. And once they get the pieces apart, I'm guessing that brings us to recycling and materials.
Exactly. We're seeing mechanical recycling pilots right now where machines physically grind up heavily bonded shoes. They use complex density separators to divide the ground up bits into distinct material streams.
Do you end up with, like, a pile of granulated rubber, a pile of foam, a pile of textile fluff?
Yep. Now, currently, a lot of this downcycled material ends up as playground flooring or the squishy surface of running tracks.
Right, I've seen that.
But the ultimate goal, however, is to use that recovered material to mold the bases of brand new shoes. We're also seeing heavy investment in bio-based polymers to replace the fossil fuels used in EVA and TPU foams.
Wait, okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
Because I am already seeing the result of those biopolymer investments on the shelf.
Right, the marketing.
Yeah. You walk into a store, and the shoebox is stamped with huge green letters saying biodegradable or made with plant-based algae foam. Is that a legitimate breakthrough, or is it mostly just greenwashing to make us feel less guilty about our consumption?
You should approach those labels with extreme skepticism.
Really?
Yes. True biodegradability in commercial footwear is incredibly rare. Let's look at the mechanics of a shoe that uses a bio-based foam derived from castor beans or algae.
Okay.
That material choice is a positive step for reducing our reliance on drilling for oil. However, if that plant-based foam is then glued to a synthetic polyester upper using industrial adhesives...
And reinforced with hard plastic heel counters.
Exactly. That shoe will not compost.
Because nature doesn't have an enzyme designed to eat industrial shoe glue. You can't just toss it in your garden and expect it to turn into soy.
It will sit in a landfill for decades, if not centuries, just like a traditional shoe. The research is unambiguous on this point. True circularity requires monomaterial design.
Meaning the entire shoe is constructed from just one single type of material.
Yes. If a shoe is 100% made from a specific recyclable thermoplastic, you don't have to worry about separating the foam from the fabric or dissolving the glue.
You just melt the entire object down in one go and inject it into a mold to print a new shoe.
Exactly. Slapping a biodegradable marketing sticker on a shoe that is like 10% algae and 90% glued plastic is deeply misleading to the public.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Armed with this understanding of how complex these materials are and how prevalent industry greenwashing is, how should you navigate the shoe aisle right now?
Well, some regulatory help is coming. By 2027 or 2028, the European Union plans to mandate a digital product passport, or DPP, for all apparel and footwear.
And how does a digital product passport actually change the shopping experience?
It'll likely take the form of a scannable QR code on the shoe's tag. Scanning it will force brands to reveal 16 specific environmental indicators.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, you'll see the exact material composition, the geographical traceability of where those raw materials were harvested, and the verified carbon footprint. It strips away the marketing language and forces transparency.
That is fantastic for the near future. But if someone is buying shoes today and they see a label claiming a low carbon footprint based on an LCA, how do they know if it's legitimate?
Look for third-party verification. A brand really shouldn't be grading its own homework,
Right.
but more importantly, check what is called the functional unit. A rigorous label compares the exact carbon footprint per pair of shoes.
Prepare.
Right. If the brand is just boasting about abstract corporate goals, like claiming their corporate headquarters runs on wind power, they are actively distracting you from the environmental cost of the actual physical product in your hand.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've covered a lot of macro industry data, but your most immediate power is literally sitting in your closet right now.
Yeah.
Direct action number 1, rotate your shoes. Don't wear the exact same pair of sneakers every single day. If you let them rest for 24 hours, the foam midsole has time to decompress and the moisture from your feet dries out.
It's such a simple habit, but it extends the structural lifespan of the shoe significantly.
Right. And direct action number 2, find a local cobbler. If you buy a high-quality shoe, spending a fraction of the original cost to slap a new sole on it is the absolute greenest choice you can make.
There's also a really critical point to be made about donation etiquette here.
Oh, yeah. This is important.
Many people assume they're doing a charitable deed by dropping their completely blown out, destroyed running shoes into a donation bin.
I mean, we've all done it. You hold up a shoe with a hole in the toe and think, well, maybe someone out there can still use these.
But thrift stores and charities cannot sell garbage. When
Right.
you donate a shoe that is structurally unsound and unwearable, you aren't saving it from the landfill. You are just forcing a charity to pay the logistical and financial cost of throwing it in the landfill for you.
Which is terrible.
Yeah, only donate shoes that are clean and genuinely have miles left in them.
It all really comes back to taking personal responsibility for the end of life of the things we buy. If we strip away the clever ad campaigns, the laces made of ocean plastic, the earthy-looking cardboard boxes, true sustainability has absolutely nothing to do with buying a shoe made of recycled water bottles if that shoe is going to fall apart in 3 months.
This raises an important question, really, that you should ask yourself every time you're at a cash register or hovering over a checkout button online.
What's that?
Are you replacing a truly worn-out pair of shoes that cannot be repaired, or are you just adding another 35 kilograms of carbon to the atmosphere because you want to participate in a new trend?
That's a fundamental mindset shift. We have to prioritize durability. We have to prioritize repairability. We have to stop viewing our footwear as disposable commodities and start treating them as long-term tools.
Exactly. When you realize that 80% of the planetary damage happened before you even opened the box, you naturally start treating the object with a lot more respect.
Absolutely. So as you tie your shoelaces tomorrow morning, consider this. What if the ultimate status symbol of the future isn't a pristine, brand new, straight-out-of-the-box sneaker? What if the ultimate flex is a pair of shoes that clearly show a decade of repairs, telling the story of 1,000 miles walked without leaving a single scar on the earth?